Got my day started right. A bowl of oatmeal, a banana, and now I'm going to answer some viewer questions from you guys right here. For those of you guys that don't know me, my name is Benjamin Nowak. This is the Smallmouth Experience video number 9 in a 14 days of quarantine video series. Now, last night's video I mentioned that I was going to be doing this, but I was accepting questions over on my Instagram. Some fishing related, some not fishing related, and some sort of like fish theory or like how I manage, waypoints or follow fish. So I'm going to answer a couple of those questions for you guys. I think we're going to keep it to around 5 and have some fun with this thing. So we're going to start kind of surface level. And one of the questions that I received was, what is my all-time favorite bass lure? Now I'm going to talk about largemouth bass, then I'm going to talk about smallmouth bass if I need to get bit, and I'm going to talk about smallmouth bass if I just want to catch them. My all-time favorite bass fishing lure is a 1/2 ounce jig. I have 2 tied on pretty much all of the time, but a 1/2 ounce flipping jig, a 1/2 ounce skipping or swimming jig, and this bait catches them. Whether I'm fishing smallmouth, largemouth, anything in between, a jig catches them. It's so versatile. You can do so many different things with it, and that's why I love fishing a jig. It's also an incredible bite. Fish it on heavy 20-pound test line. You can set the hook and flip them in the boat and have some fun with it. Now, if we're talking smallmouth bass and I just need to go out and get bites, I'm going to be throwing a Ned rig. A Ned rig, like a jig, I always have tied on, especially when I'm going out smallmouth fishing. I always have a Ned rig tied on because it gets a lot of bites. I really like the TRD ticklers or hula sticks in the Drew's Craw color, or basically anything green pumpkin base is really, really good for smallmouth and largemouth bass alike. Now, if I just am on fish and just want to get bit, like just want to feel the bite on this bait, it would be a crankbait. I love to fish like a medium diving crankbait, one that dives to 9 to 12 foot of water, 9 to 15 foot of water. Reel that thing along rock piles, reel it around rock sand transitions, and just get my arm ripped off. That is my all-time favorite bite ever, because those fish stop it and then they come up, and they're pretty active fish typically. They're fish that want to be moving, and so they come to the top, they dance, they have a lot of fun. So those would be my all-time favorite baits. The next question that I want to touch on is, what do you look for finding spawning smallmouth? This is from Ben Pierce Fishing. When I'm looking for spawning smallmouth, the biggest thing I'm going to be looking for are big, expansive flats that are relatively protected. I'm looking for areas, especially if I'm on the Great Lakes, I'm looking for areas that have some sort of small bay to them with a large flat with some sort of mixture of rock to sand. Those fish won't spawn just around all rock, so you want to find some sort of mixture where there's, a good sand bottom with some rocks mixed in, because that rock is going to give them the opportunity to position on that boulder specifically to stay protected from, the wind, the waves, the elements. Now, this goes for basically anywhere that you're smallmouth fishing. You want to typically look for more open water areas. They don't tend to be in like the backs of creeks or canals like largemouth do. So you're looking for sort of main lake stuff or front of the river stuff, like towards the main lake typically. A little bit deeper water situations with some sort of, soft bottom to a hard piece of cover where those fish can set up that's relatively protected. So I thought that was a really unique question, because I don't typically fish too much for spawning smallmouth, but when I do, that's a really good way to do it. The next question comes in from Bryce Weaver 01, and he asked what knot I tie for my Alabama rigs. And there are only 2 knots that I tie to connect my baits. That knot there, hopefully you guys can see it, that knot is the double San Diego jam. It has 3 tag ends. I'm not going to go through how to tie it. There are a lot of good videos out there talking about, how you tie the double San Diego jam. But for bigger baits, I like that jam knot. Otherwise, 100% of the time, I guess 98% of the time, I'm tying a Palomar knot. Super quick, super strong, super effective. I retie quite a bit, so it's probably not the all-around best, but the Palomar knot is so good, lasts so long, and it's so quick to tie. So this next question comes in from my boy Eric Schoolmaster. He makes Schoolmaster tackle. He has tubes, he has drop shot baits, but he asked me, what is my favorite beer? And I'm interested in this perspective that I don't really drink beer. I'm not a beer drinker, and I'm not a drinker in general, but when I'm drinking, it'll be whiskey, whether it's whiskey and Coke, whiskey on the rocks, but I really like whiskey over like beer or wine or other sorts of alcoholic beverage, I do suppose. I'll do 1 or 2 more. Comes in from Carl Hartwick. When it comes to graphing and waypointing, do you have a strategy to stay organized? So I don't fish all over the country. I predominantly am fishing in the state of Michigan, which is really nice because I can pretty much have access to all of these lakes all the time. So I store all of my waypoints on an SD card on my graph, and I can keep waypoints from year to year to year to year to year, and I'm typically marking hard pieces of cover down on the bottom or structure changes. Now, when I do mark grass, this is the one thing that has burned me a lot. When I mark grass on my graph, which smallmouth do get around grass quite a bit, it can be hard from year to year because that grass will die off and grow in different areas. So a lot of times I'll go check a lot of the waypoints, and if the grass isn't there, I'll like delete the waypoint and just go mark it where I find it next. So for the most part, most of that stuff stays pretty organized from the perspective of it always stays on my graph, and I'm marking it using the icons that Garmin offers. Like if it's a boulder, I'll use the boulder icon. If it's, you know, sticks, I'll use the sticks icon. If it's a ledge, there's so many different little icons you can use on there. So I'll use that to kind of identify what it is. But if it's grass, that's really the hardest thing because it moves every year. So that's pretty much how I use the icons and how I try to stay organized when I'm fishing. And then final question from my boy M Profit. How do you try a new spot? What baits do you throw, the amount of time you spend there, and how do you see if there are bass there? So this time of year is really tough for me, and I've had a conversation with Dirds quite a bit. Is it even worth it for me to go to new bodies of water and new areas this time of year? Because these fish are so grouped up. They're so hard to catch, especially in really cold water situations. Those cold water situations can be super tough because you don't know, like, you could be fishing the right area, but it's just not right yet. So it's hard for me to go to brand new bodies of water this time of year or fish brand new spots. Typically the way I do it, I use my graph to see if there are fish there. For the most part, I can like identify if there are fish on a spot, especially if it's offshore with my graph. I can see if there are fish there, if they're going to be active, just based on how they're positioned. And that's going to determine how much time I spend there. But really no more than a half hour. Like if I'm not getting bit on a specific offshore spot, I'll move, I'll go check to find something else, because it's just not worth me wasting my entire day on a couple spots where I'm fishing for inactive fish. Somewhere on the lake there are active fish that I should be able to get to go. Now if I'm fishing down a bank, like if I think this contour change looks good or I think this line of docks looks good, I'll fish it for a decent bit until I have confidence, okay, they're not on this type of dock, they're not on this type of dock, they're not on the dock with a little bit of rock on it, okay, they're not on this line of docks, and then I'll move to somewhere else, so on and so forth, depending on what type of bank you're fishing. So hopefully that answered that question. I know it's kind of hard, and bait choice, I just go with confidence baits, especially on brand new areas or bodies of water. I'll pick up a jig, I'll pick up a Ned rig, crankbait, maybe pick up a little swim bait, but I'll pick up something that I can cover water with, something that I'm confident will get bit if there are fish there actively feeding. So that's really how I break down a new spot, break down a new area that I identify. Use my graph, use confidence baits, and kind of just use gut feel to know, okay, there are fish here, there are not fish here. Try not to waste too much time on stuff that's not proven time and time again. So I had a lot of fun with this thing. I hope you guys enjoyed this as well. If you did, please do me a huge favor, give it a thumbs up. If you guys want to see more Q&As like this one right here, let me know in the comment section below. Also, comment a question for me to answer down in the comment section. I'm going to try to be answering all those comments here very shortly. Hope you enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button down below. And as always, take care, Ted Lyons. God bless. Pursue passion.